This podcast is brought to you by Infinite Resources, a local staffing agency connecting diverse job candidates in central Iowa companies.
Amplified.
Welcome to Shed Talk.
Unveiling the conversations that thrive behind the shed, where authenticity meets unfiltered stories.
I'm Javier Toole, certified personal trainer and owner of Tool Shed Training.
And I'm Tammy Humpel, professional educator and leadership coach. Welcome back to those of you who have been listening. It's been so great to hear from you about the topics we've been talking about. Special thanks to our friends at Infinite Resources in here at the Amplified Studio for providing the space and platform to talk with you and to share our voices. And we also have some additional sponsors today.
Laura Waterhoff at Salon Indy, 6420 Coachlight Drive, West Des Moines. Hit her up if you're interested in a new look or the latest style. Thanks for always keeping me looking fresh, and I'm fresh today.
Again today, just like last time.
It's worked out perfect. Tool Shed Training at the Shed, 12391 University Avenue, Suite 101, Clive. We're providing training for the everyday person. And our friends over at 5-Star Nutrition on Hickman and Urbandale. Go see them to help you with all your nutritional supplement needs.
So if you haven't had a chance to listen to our most recent episode regarding depression, we want you to hit that up and take a listen. The topic was depression, finding joy amidst sadness. And we want to give another shout out to Corey and Blair, who were here with us from Integrated Psychiatry and sharing their insight and just some really great conversation. So you'll want to be sure and listen to that. That was kind of a bit of a break from our four-part series, but that brings us to today, and it is our final episode, not our done, all the way done. We'll be back. Don't worry. Don't you worry. We'll be back talking about more things, but this is the final episode of the 4 parts of our Return to Happiness series, and that is the series about security being an illusion. Security is an illusion. And we're going to kind of wrap that up today and wrap up our conversations by recapping a little bit what we've talked about already in those first 3 episodes. And then we've hit on this in each of those episodes with each of those topics, but really want to talk about today how our traditional values and the traditional ideas play into all of those first 3 topics. So we've talked about security as we see it being an illusion, and we talked a lot about money and wealth and what that looked like. Then we talked about recognition and what we need, and that 3rd episode was about success and how we define success. And truly, really and truly, I think our personal views and values enter into that, but so much about that is our tradition, the traditional expectations of where we live in society. So that's what we're going to hit on. I do want to say, as I was thinking about this and we were preparing, I looked up the traditional meaning of the word security. And the traditional meaning of security is freedom from anxiety. So it made me wonder then if our traditional ideas about wealth and money, position, power, recognition, fame, success, all of those things that we've been talking about influence our behavior and our day-to-day actions, and do they truly keep us free from anxiety, or do they do just the opposite?
Well, we haven't done a podcast for a while, so I need some freedom from anxiety. Yeah, this one's an interesting one because I think when we first started talking about this, we really thought about, are we talking about like traditional stuff like getting married, and those things are going to factor in what we talk about a little bit. But I think we also discovered that we're talking about like traditional things that may not be involved right now at this current time, that may need to be involved in new traditional things that are being presented. And I thought about this a lot. I was lifting weights this morning. It's weird, right? Cause
I know, so weird. You never do that.
Run a gym. But some of the topics we're going to talk about today, like in the stats that we talk about, were they dealing with these things before there was actually stats to take? Mm-hmm. And I really thought about maybe in the 40s there wasn't as many surveys offered. So maybe people were dealing with some of the same things we're going to talk about today, but it just wasn't like documented as much.
And so I wonder then, did people question? Certainly they questioned in their own mind, but we have wondered about this too, how much societal influences actually do change our minds or lean us one way or another, maybe move us, shift us away from our traditional values and beliefs, make us question whether that was ever the right thing, instead of thinking about an evolution of those values.
Right, because we start looking at stats, and I think, some of the stats we talked about, like one of them was like social success. Like since 1970, women are saying they're less satisfied with their, maybe with their life and are maybe through experiencing a little bit more loneliness. And I look at that stat, and was that stat maybe occurring before 1970? Like, was there some loneliness before in these other areas and just not documented as well? Like, or how is that stat used? Is it used in, like, do we want people, like, who's doing the stat, and how is that information being used? Even like, let's even talk about like the divorce rate stat. Like, 51% of people are currently getting divorced, I think, is one of the stats right now that's out there. But like, if you even look at it, you can say so many people aren't married right now. But does that include people whose spouses have passed away? Or nowadays people are getting married later. So how are we getting the information, and how is it being utilized to influence? And how do we perceive that information?
Right, and what is it truly a representation of? And we know with statistics and numbers, we can make them say, or at least lean in the direction that we want them to be. But it makes me wonder, too, if we've lost a little bit of our critical thinking.
Right.
Because, one, access to information is immediate. It's immediate for you. It's immediate for me. If we don't know something, we Google it. But how often do we pause to question whether that is an accurate answer, or whether that's an accurate statistic, what the experience or perception is behind that number?
Right.
And really check into it. And it makes me wonder what we're allowing ourselves to be told, maybe unintentionally.
Because, you think about a lot of traditions, and I'm using marriage again just because that's a basic one. But I mean, does that stop someone from getting married? The way, and is there a reason why we're presenting such a big piece of it? Is it because we feel like we're missing more traditional family values, or maybe the population's getting too big? Well, who's using this representation of these stats, and how is it actually being used for good, bad, not so bad, just relevant info? But I think it makes me think about experiences in my life. The minute you see that stat, how do you relate to that stat? Do you immediately go to the negative, or do you immediately go to like a positive area, like I can help change that stat, or in that kind of thought process?
And what kind of pressure does that put on? Particularly, I'm thinking about, and probably because this is my life right now, I have young adults. What kind of pressure does that put on young adults into either questioning themselves and their values, even if they truly believe that marriage is in their future? That's a security that they see in their future. It makes, when you see 51%, well, what are the odds that this is actually going to work? So what kinds of stories are we allowing ourselves to believe and then perpetuate?
Right, because I think we also miss the other stat. I think 64% of people are still married. Like, what if we presented that stat? Would people have a different perception, and all of a sudden be like, well, yeah, I'm going to do it without such hesitation and with a little bit more confidence and a little less anxiety, because there is success? Like, or has it been presented to us in such a way nowadays that, well, maybe I'm hesitant a little bit more because that's a scary number.
Or, it doesn't really matter so much, right? So I'll try it out and see how it goes. And if we end up not together, we're just a statistic. It's not that important anymore, right? So there's that perception too.
And I think it would go back to what you just said. It's like, how often are we missing that thing? Why do we want to do something? Or do we want to get married because it's my mom and dad are saying, hey, it's time, or you're going to the family reunion and somebody's like, oh my gosh, you're 32 years old now and you're not married yet. And all of a sudden you're feeling a little bit of pressure. And some anxiety, like you start wondering, is there something wrong with me because I'm not in that place? Or how about we I think this podcast is one thing we talk about is giving people the chance to really think for themselves. We're going to present these ideas. So if you think about the divorce rate, you think about, do you need to get married? Do you want to get married? How about you think about that? How about you erase every single stat that you've ever seen? You erase every perceived notion that your mom and dad are telling you or your friends and family and say, is this what's right for me? Is this the time for me to do it? Have the confidence to do it. Being able to express yourself to people. I know I'm going to wait till I'm ready, and I'm going to do it because of the reasons I want to do it. If that was presented more often, would we see more success?
I believe we would. And again, I think it goes back to not only the critical thinking, but also that discernment. And that's an internal process that we don't necessarily encourage anymore. We are pretty sure that we need someone else to be involved in all of our decision making, right? And I think that crosses generations. We're just not as confident in our values and beliefs. And I wonder if a little bit of that is because we are evolving. We're evolving as a society. We are bigger. We're together more. We have lots of family structures, lots of values, lots of folks from different places than where we grew up with different values than what we even knew about. There are things that I wouldn't have even thought about that I know, and I'm a better person for it. But I just wonder how much we're really depending on our own selves to think through what we truly do want and why we want it. Like you said, why we want it. And you spoke about in the 70s, women in particular, there were statistics showing these women were maybe not as content or more lonely. And I truly think we have a loneliness pandemic. I think that enters into this too.
Yep.
Let's get married so I don't have to be alone. Let's make a decision together so I don't have to make this on my own. We just don't trust ourselves to be alone. And I'm not sure why that is.
And I think that also puts maybe a little bit inside us as parents. Like what values are we trying to get our kids to do? You know, when I think about Royce a lot, you know, I hope he has a very successful marriage. I mean, you want that for him, but I want it to be his choice. You know, one thing I try not to push upon him is, you know, any pressure in relationships other than be the best at it. Or like, you need to be married someday. You need to have kids. I don't think I've ever really had those conversations with him because I think it's a different time than it was when I grew up. I think it's a different time than when my mom grew up. I think it's a most definitely different time than when my great-grandparents are around, where things are different. I want Royce to be able to make his own decisions on maybe he wants to choose his career first, go into longer relationships before he gets married and makes decisions to have kids without any pressure from me, because I think I probably put enough pressure on him in other things.
Well, and I wonder if we are just holding on a little too long. I think that's pretty common in our generation as parents that I didn't necessarily notice with my parents and my parents' generation. They definitely raised me. They instilled their values and what was right and wrong and their expectations. We talked about this a little bit too. I don't know that those expectations were ever just stated, right? They were implied, and I understood. I was pretty clear about what those expectations were, but they didn't hold on to continuing to try to guide me. Once I went to college, that was it. Like, I called home on the landline, and I have dated myself already on this podcast, so
I don't even use a cell phone anymore.
Right?
It comes right from my head. No.
Yeah, and so there wasn't that physical connection that I have with my kids, especially my girls, because they're close in proximity to me too. But even Jacob, I can get on the phone as long as I can get the time change figured out in my head immediately.
Right.
So that connection, that physical connection, is really there. And I wonder if we're holding on to that longer than is necessary for them to start to feel more independence.
Right, because I think, you know, I look at my mom and dad, it was like, you know, pack your stuff. You're going to school. If you decided to go to school, there wasn't really at that time. There was some expectation, but it wasn't sitting down saying this is the expectation to go to college. It was the expectation to make sure you find a career,
Could pay your bills,
take care of your stuff. If you have kids, take care of your family.
be not in debt, not to carry debt.
Make sure you pay your house off someday. Those were kind of the things that they talked about. Those were the things. Make sure you save some money for yourself.
Take care of your family if you have a family.
And there wasn't really too much guidance, I think, and this is personally in my set, if you went to school or if you didn't. Or nowadays, I think, in my sense, the way that I am, the first thing I look at Royce is your first option is school. And the traditions are changing, expectations are changing a little bit longer, but I do probably hold on a little bit. I don't think my mom really ever checked my grades when I was in college, which she probably should have a little bit more, and I probably would have went to school for 6 years. But
you did it, and you finished, and you knew in the end what you had to do to finish. No one was telling you or calling you
because nowadays,
to make that decision.
The new tradition is every Thursday I send a message to Royce and be like, send me your grades, because there are different kind of expectations. I think one of the other things we talk about, different traditions that maybe are more different than anything, is how we get influence. Like, how much influence are we getting from social media? I'm not going to lie, when I was little, I wasn't picking out the newspaper and reading it that often. If I wanted news, I would probably go read Sports Illustrated if I took the time to read it. But now, like, my mom nowadays may be giving you information, your dad may be giving you information. If that information is kind of what you think is right, but you're not for sure, there's a whole nother influence right in front of your face.
And not just one, but several avenues for influence and information, and the extreme variety in right or wrong. And you get to choose, and no one even has to know that that's where you're getting your information, right? Even those things that we've already talked about, marriage, think about the influencers that could lead you one way or another, and the whole variety that's in there. So there's a lot of influence there. When I think about school, for me, it felt like that unspoken expectation. But as I think back, really, I think the expectation to go to college maybe came more from actually being in school, my teachers, than my parents. Like, they didn't push me one way or another. They were proud of me to make that decision if I wanted to, and they would support me either way, but I didn't feel quite the pressure. And think about the news and social media and all that's posted about going to school, going to college, making a big life decision when you're 17, and the pressure that's behind that. So there's that too.
And I think that's where you start looking at maybe some traditions are getting lost because there's so many avenues. One thing we talked about, I think one of the traditions that I felt very good that I kept with Royce, and he did a big part of it, he always sat at the kitchen table, which made it easier for me, was to have those conversations with Royce at the table, where I had an hour with him to eat and to review some of the things I know he wanted to talk about before I would leave work. I'd read every stat on the NFL and NBA because I knew that's what he wanted to talk about, but it opened conversations. And I think now with social media, or even with the busyness of kids doing a lot of activities, us working a little bit more probably than back in the day, is taking away that piece. And now you start looking at what traditions should maybe we think about bringing back. What traditions are really important, and what's taking away those traditions, which is giving us the communication so that loneliness isn't there, or so that social time with your kids and your family are there, or your friends even.
Makes me think about the busier we are, the lonelier. Wow, that was really hard to say. The lonely.
Return to the mic.
We are. Sometimes we're so busy doing the things that we aren't spending that time connecting. Corey talked a lot about that, and making time to have that face-to-face interaction and connection, and the physical sitting down and have dinner. We talked about that way back in the beginning, that maybe we need to get back to some of those things, because the lack of some of that actual security is sending us out towards some false security.
Right. I'm going to tell on myself today. Somebody asked me, like, what are you doing for Easter? I'm like, probably sitting in the gym and working, and then going home. And then, I think about what Royce is doing for Easter. he's going to stay at college and work. And all of a sudden is like, is this our new tradition, or did we abandon a tradition that's solely important of making sure I was with my mom, making sure I'm with my brother and sister who still do that tradition. I mean, that's still very important to them. But for me, like work and running a business has become so important to me that I'm probably missing something. And it's now starting a new tradition for the next generation of what I spawned off. And is it right? Is it wrong? I don't know. Is what's important, what's not. But I mean, I think it's something for me to look at. I think it's something for everyone to look at.
And I think that's interesting because you're at a pivotal moment in your relationship with him, but also as a parent, it's a big change. And what I've been noticing about the times that I question what I just thought I knew to be true about how life was supposed to be, about what I was supposed to go after next, what I needed to do for my family. When I start to question that, it's like the big changes. Like when we went from being married together, the two of us, to having a baby, to having a family, and it takes so much energy. You have to put so much energy into that. That busyness starts to kick in, and then you're so busy growing that family and doing the things and trying to organize the schedules and figure out how to manage your time together in all of the busyness, that when that time is gone, then it suddenly feels really empty. It feels like there's no meaning, no purpose. And that's where I think the discernment for me has really come in. Another hard time for me wasn't when my kids went to college. It was the time after they left college, partly because they were in close proximity, but I just really enjoyed that time with them as young adults and getting to know them and what they wanted. So when I think about the times I really started to wonder about what should our traditions look like, how long should we hang on to them, how important is that, I had to take a look at what maybe needed to evolve for us. We're kind of in that right now. The kids are starting their own families, and it's just not going to be physically possible for us to get together for all the holidays that we typically do. So what does that look like? And I think I can choose. I can choose to grieve that and get stuck in that sadness because of what I thought it should be, or I could embrace the evolution and see what of those traditional values that you're talking about we want to hold on to as a family and what that might look like going forward.
Or you can do what my dad did. He started the best tradition. When everyone moved out, he threw everyone's bed out so no one came back.
You have to bring a sleeping bag because your bed is gone.
Maybe that's the new tradition I need to start. Make sure no one else ever comes back to my house. This is, like I said, this has been a kind of a different one for us to talk about. But I do want to ask you a question, and I'm going to ask you publicly. I think this is public for anyone who wants to listen to. And we talked about this. When your roles change, and throughout time, roles have changed. Where, I guess, back in hunting days, men went and hunted, and females basically took care of everything and basically ran the show, and we would go do our best to hunt. And I think I read something that if the female tribe went with the male hunters, they came back with more protein. So I don't know what we were doing, but we were doing something while you guys were running everything. But it talked about, do you still have a best friend? One of the things that females were talking about has the development of time went, careers happen. Even with careers happen, you still kept the role of making sure that everything was done at home. The kids were taken care of. You just added something to your plate. Do you have a best friend that you talk to on a daily basis or see at least once a week?
I do, but it's my husband, right? So when I got married, that shifted. I have girlfriends, and I think that's different for different people. Yep. For me, those girlfriends have sort of shifted and changed depending on where I was in my life, where we lived, what was happening with the kids, what was happening with me in my career. It's interesting that you asked, because one of the questions on the Gallup survey that is given at work, where I support and work, is, do you have a best friend at work? And it's a super controversial question because people are like, no, my best friends are not at work. I don't hang out with my best friends at work. I have friends who I work with. But the intent of that question is, do you have someone who you can trust, who you can go to if there's something that happens that you need to confide in someone? It's not so much a best friend, but I also feel like what I grew up thinking about a best friend, like I can still picture my best friend. I still am in contact with my best friend from childhood. And that I don't have anymore.
Right.
That I don't have anymore. I have lots of friends with common interests that I could confide in and call in the middle of the night if I needed to. That list isn't very big. I consider them some of my best friends, but a best girlfriend in that. So I wonder too, unless we intentionally work on that and schedule those times, and some people are way better at it than I am for sure.
Because I think when you look at that, I think that tradition may be a tradition that we need to look at a little bit too. Because I think having a friend, and I would say I'm the same way. I don't make time for a lot of things, and more people will probably tell you that. And maybe it is time to find a friend, like to take time to get away from work, to take time to be able to talk about things that are going on in my home or what are going on in my life, and make it more important. Because when I have spare time, it's usually on YouTube, or it's usually on my phone, and that piece
or
of
doing something for work.
Because I remember my dad, he had buddies.
Right, they went to the coffee shop.
Yeah, or they hung out and had a beer out on the patio or on the porch.
Yeah, my dad, no coffee for him, but but for sure, yeah.
Or my mom, had friends and they would quilt or they would bake things. And nowadays, or they would do woodworking. If you ask some of those social skills and social things that just aren't existing anymore, and I think that big piece of socialization may be something that isn't important to everyone. And I'm not saying I want a bunch of friends, so I don't need a bunch of people. but
we're not going to give your phone number out.
But I think it is something I should look into.
Well, and I think it's important. I mean, this brings us right back to the tradition of marriage, right? And leaving your family. And when I think about if my husband is my best friend and my only best friend, there are things that get hard between the two of us, then what?
Right.
I mean, I have adult children, and I probably talk to them more than I should. I need someone.
Yeah, listen to us.
If I think about it, I need someone that isn't my family.
This podcast is now, do you want to be our friend? I think if we could...
Maybe we just need to watch Sesame Street, right? And we'll figure out the friendship business.
Gotta learn it again. I think today when we talk about this, we want people to understand that, your life isn't supposed to be a prison. Your life is supposed to be something you make of it. If it's a new tradition, if it's an old tradition, make it your tradition. Make it something that you value. Make it something that you want to be part of. Make it sure it's something that you want to pass on to the next generation or to a friend or to whoever. But don't put so much pressure on yourself for things that may not belong to you or are supposed to be you. Because you're supposed to be yourself. Because
someone else says they should be, or because something else or someone else's yardstick says that it should be.
Right. Tim, I'm going to let you wrap this one up. We can't believe we made it through. Is this our fifth podcast?
This is 5. Yep. It's the 4th of our 4-part series, but then we had the one on depression too. So
well, we're going to smoke every one that we do from now on. It's got to be better than this one. I'm just joking. I think we did pretty well. But I'm going to give you the wrap up because this is what you're excellent at it. And I got to tell you one other thing. I tried to dress nicer today, and the clothes that I put on just didn't work.
So I think you don't look nice.
So I was like, Tammy's going to wear a nice white shirt.
I did. I mean, I got the shirt on, but not the jacket. Today I dressed down.
I put on these dress pants, and they were kind of tight. So I was like.
So you have to be comfortable.
Right.
No, see, it's not about what you feel like you should be doing. You have to show up like you.
That's right.
You have to show up like you. So when I think about the return to happiness is how this all started, and we wanted to share with people some ideas, some things that we have been talking about, some things that we talk about in the gym that we feel like maybe people are ignoring in their lives, or at least not willingly talking about and things that matter for their well-being, because we are all about, right, our well-being, and not just our physical well-being, but our mental well-being and our spiritual well-being. And this is all part of that. And that's how we came up with the 4 parts, right? And there's so many more parts to it, but I think the bottom line, like you said, is really we want people to start to think for themselves. What matters most to me? What connects me to people? How can I stay grounded in what matters most and make my relationships better? And in that, also be a better me.
Right.
Be a better me. And we have talked about how our brains work that way, and they can get stuck in the negativity, but we can also build on the gratitude and the positivity and do some things, a lot of things actually, that can propel us into a better space and maybe have friends. The friends that we need. So
regrettably, it's time to close the doors at Shed Talk for today. We'd like to thank our guest, which we didn't have any today. I think this is last week's.
This is last week. See, I didn't update all of our notes. But we can thank Amplified.
You know what? I do want to do that
Again.
before we close, because they changed the studio. It looks awesome.
It really does.
And it's amazing. So thank you guys for doing that for us. Okay, I'm going to try this one more time. Regrettably, it's time to close the doors at Shed Talk today. I'm Javier.
And I'm Tammy.
And this is Shed Talk.
This podcast is brought to you by Infinite Resources, a local staffing agency connecting diverse job candidates in central Iowa companies.
Amplified.